Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats weekly podcast episode number 111. I'm your host, Dan Matson, aka Wooden Boat Dan. If you can't do it, nobody can. And this is the world's first podcast, that's right, the first in the world, fully dedicated 150% to celebrating the art, craft, history, tradition, and romance of wooden vessels around the world. Thanks for joining me today for the podcast, folks, episode 111. Wow, I can't believe it's been more than 2 years since I started this. I'm having fun as usual, although in the winter there's not as much activity to report on and fun things to do, but that's all right. Today's featured segment is an interview with Pete Bergstrom. Pete reached out to me by email a few months ago and said, "Hey Dan, I've been listening to your podcast and enjoy it. I live in Monticello, Illinois. And I did a program at our church where I basically, with the assistance of 8 or so kids, we built a wooden boat at the church and used it as a mentoring, training, skills acquisition program. Skills acquisition doesn't sound quite right, but you get my drift. Anyway, he built this boat. Took him 3 years because they basically worked on it just on Sunday afternoons, and it's a bateau skiff. And anyway, Pete talks about that experience and what he learned, what the kids learned and stuff, and it's a pretty cool interview, so I would love it if you'd stick around for that. I think you're going to like it. Well, this podcast is about getting in the wooden boat game. If you're listening and you don't own a wooden boat, or you haven't built one, or you haven't been out on one lately, it's time you get in the game. One way to do that is to purchase my ebook, which is a guide for building your first boat. If you have any interest in that, this guide walks you through the steps before you build of making some decisions about size and construction method and what type of boat to build and how much it's going to cost, how long it's going to take, those sort of things. You can go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/ebook1 to get more information there. The book sells for $4.99. It's an ebook, $4.99. That's the cost of a venti latte at Starbucks. So check it out when you get a chance. Also, if you haven't seen the video of my recent Scamp sailboat launch, you can go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/scamp for sale, and you can see launch of the boat there. She's a fully assembled kit, ready for sale for somebody else to paint and varnish, put on hardware, rig her, and take her to sea and have some fun. So anyway, check that out if you get a chance. This week we've got a couple new subscribers to the monthly newsletter and email list, Bill Hamilton and Brian Mosher. Welcome, guys, to Hooked on Wooden Boats. Great to have you on board. If you haven't subscribed yet, I would encourage you to do so. You can go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/subscribe. Give me your first, last name and your email address, and you'll be automatically on board for the free monthly newsletter. And it's a lot of fun. It's a great way for me to connect with people. November 20th, I will be giving a presentation at the Northwest Maritime Center in Port Townsend. That's a Thursday, from noon to 1:30. I'll be giving a presentation called Building Your First Wooden Boat, a Primer, and it's based on my ebook, and I'm going to walk people through the process that I just mentioned that my ebook takes you through. I'm going to hand around some props that illustrate different build methods, and we're going to have some fun. So if you can make it to that, that would be awesome. And please come and introduce yourself. Well, I took my Scamp this week and put a tarp over it and rolled it outside. and I finished the rudder. So the boat's basically complete as far as I'm going to take it right now. I've got it advertised, or I'm putting an advertisement in Wooden Boat Magazine and Small Craft Advisor Magazine that'll come out in December. Hoping to sell it there. So I have not started my next boat, which I'm a little bummed about, but I got to get this boat sold before I can start my next one. So, but what I did do to quench my woodworking appetite this weekend is we bought an old oak dining room table. Theoretically, it's 100 years old, which I believe it after taking it apart. The bottom was warped and a bunch of it was cracked. So I took it's a round table, 48-inch round oak table. It's actually got an oak veneer. So I took the tabletop off and I took the base and took it completely apart. There's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 pieces to the base. Took it all apart. A lot of the parts were cracked, so I epoxied them together. The bottom was warped, so I pulled that down and put in some thickened epoxy on that and got it all back together, and it looks really good. And epoxy's amazing stuff. This West Systems is what I use. I know there's other good brands out there. Just pulled that baby back into nice shape, put the top on, and she looks good to go. So I got a little fix there. And as I mentioned last week, I'm going to try my hand at building some small stools and benches with storage in them and selling them at a local store here. So I'm kind of looking forward to doing that. Anything to get out in my shop and get my tools out and have some fun is a good thing, definitely. Okay, we're going to move on to the interview with Pete Bergstrom from Monticello, Illinois. Let's roll the tape, guys. Take it away, Pete. It is November 2nd, 2013. I'm on the phone with Pete Bergstrom from Monticello, Illinois. Pete, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Dan. This is awesome. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, so Pete emailed me a while back and said, hey, I've been listening to your podcast and really enjoy it. And we're doing a little project here at our church where I'm kind of guiding a group of youth through building a wooden boat. And we're having a lot of fun and be willing to talk about it on the podcast. So I thought it sounded like a great story. So, Pete, let's start, though, with your personal history. Tell me what you did as a youth, where you grew up, and if you did any boating.
Sure. I grew up in the Boston area, and I actually did do some sailing when I was in my mid-teens. Unfortunately, my parents had split up, and one of the places that we lived, we had a friend of mine, his name is Don, actually, that lived in the house behind where we lived, and he had this... It was actually a town-class sailboat, which is a relatively famous class up in that area. It's about a 16-foot or so wooden two-person sailboat, and he liked to race it, and he needed somebody to go racing with him. So he taught me how to sail, and we spent a lot of time in the summers, over about 2 or 3 different summers, getting a chance to sail in a lot of different regattas, and sailed out on Newport Harbor one time and things like that, but mostly it was inland lake sailing and stuff like that. But I had so much fun, and as I got older, I really appreciated the mentoring that he did for me at that time of my life. My dad was still around, but it was just kind of a weekend type thing, so this was really nice to have another guy in my life, and it really helped. And then from there, I graduated high school in Boston and joined the Army. I went in and I became an aircraft mechanic, then went to flight school, and I actually managed to spend 6 years flying helicopters for the Army in the mid-'80s or so, and that was an absolutely fun time of life, but that actually got me out to Washington State, where you're at. I was out of Fort Lewis for most all of my Army career. And then I absolutely love the area out there, and one of these days I think I'll probably want to get back there. I have a brother that lives up in Seattle right now as a pediatrician, but... still haven't managed to get out there and visit him yet because I'm afraid that I'll get homesick and I won't ever want to leave.
So, Pete, it must, it's, although I'm looking at the rain starting, I think we had a pretty good summer, but I think it's over. But so, Pete, it must be pretty fun to fly helicopters.
Well, yeah, it was. It was absolutely a blast. I got a chance to do a lot of things that, most people will never have a chance to do. And the unique thing about flying helicopters in the military is that when you're on a reservation, you usually don't spend much time above about a 200-foot altitude. So you get some pretty unique views of trees and the landscape and all that kind of stuff. And so it was challenging, but it really teaches you to focus in about 5 different directions all at the same time. It was a great experience, and I love the military. I thoroughly enjoyed the fact that you really have to learn to work as a team, no matter what your background is, or you learn to live with a whole bunch of people you don't know, no matter what their backgrounds are and stuff like that. So it was a really, really good experience. And then, but in the mid-'80s or so, after about 6.5 years, I decided to get married, and they wanted me to go to Korea, and so I didn't think that those two things were going to match, and so I managed to get out of the service.
Okay. And so then what did you do at that point, Pete?
Well, at that point, I had been a model airplane hobbyist since I was about 12 years old. And so I was very active in the local model airplane scene in the Northwest at that time, and a chance to buy a hobby shop came up, and I took it, and I ran that down there in Tacoma. There's a hobby shop called Hobbytown, and I did that from like 87 to 91 or so, and really enjoyed that, but I had a chance to work with epoxy then, and we built and designed our own kits, and taught an awful lot of people how to fly or how to build things. So it was a good groundwork for what I ended up doing here with this project that we're talking about today.
Yeah. So did you guys design and build helicopters too, remote controlled helicopters?
I did. I've done a little bit of that. I never did any designing of the helicopters, but I did do some flying on the helicopters. But actually, helicopters right now are one of the most popular aspects of the entire radio control marketplace. But I just never got the bug to be a remote control helicopter guy.
I see. Okay.
I had all the full scale experience, and it never was the same. So.
Okay, Pete, I'm going to pause here for just a second. Okay, we're back, and Pete, I was asking about the radio-controlled helicopter, so it sounds like you did a little bit of that, but your main focus was on airplanes. Right.
Yeah, my main focus for years had always been on airplanes and building balsa wood airplanes and things like that, and making them out of fiberglass, and I got really interested into what's called pylon racing, or racing the remote control airplanes, and those are generally airplanes made with a fiberglass fuselage and a wooden or a foam wing. And so, this entire time since I was 12 years old, I was always building things that had a lot of round shapes on it and didn't have many square edges and stuff like that. So that also fit into what I would end up doing with the boat building really well. And I had a lot of experience through all that with using fiberglasses and epoxies and plywoods and all that kind of stuff, which that experience just translated into using bigger sheets of plywood and greater quantities of epoxy. Instead of mixing half an ounce at a time, I'm mixing 8 ounces at a time.
Okay.
So it really lent itself very, very well to jumping into this boat project.
Yeah, so you were telling me earlier that before we started the interview that you attend Crossroads Church in Monticello. Is it Monticello or Monticello?
No, we pronounce it Monticello.
Monticello, okay. In Monticello there, and you guys built a new building for the church to meet in. And so kind of take it from there and kind of walk me through how you got the idea for doing a boat building program, and then just tell me some of the details about that.
Okay. About 7 years ago or so, I started picking up, because of my sailing experience and stuff like that, and the sailing happened to be on a wooden boat, I found an issue of Wooden Boat magazine about 7 years ago. So I started picking that up and reading that about 7 years ago, and kind of got the idea and the bug to, someday it would be cool to build a wooden boat, because I just absolutely love them, or refurbish one. So that kind of percolated a little bit in the back of my head. And what I do for a day job is I work for a company called Horizon Hobby Incorporated, and I design nowadays I design and manage or do product management for the radio control engines that we carry at Horizon. And so through that, I get a chance to supervise and teach an awful lot of people and try to hire some new people and things like that have got mechanical skills. And one of the things that I found was starting to be truly lacking in a lot of the candidates that I was talking to, while they were maybe absolutely computer smart and brilliant people, some of them didn't know really which end of the screwdriver worked. And so I thought that there was something that was really, truly missing in the education system that they were being exposed to. And so I thought, well, maybe putting together a boat program or teaching some people how to use some hand tools at a younger age, like as a teenager, would help some people in general. And also throughout all of this, I tend to think that our mentoring culture in the United States, because I get a chance to, part of my job is I travel overseas into Asia and Germany and Europe and stuff like that a lot, is that I notice that there, the mentoring culture is very, very strong still within a lot of other countries, but I don't see a lot of that here in the U.S. It seems back in the 70s and 80s, we all decided that everybody needed to go to college and nobody needed to acquire any kind of technical skills. And so what used to be a great mentoring program through the trades with the master and journeyman and apprentice program was not available to a lot of people anymore. And so I really got a heart for trying to start a mentoring program for youth, and actually to try to get other adult males especially into learning how to mentor, because I think we've had two generations of people who haven't had any mentors and so don't realize the advantages of mentorship, or certainly don't know how to be a mentor because they've never seen one before. So that's truly what I'm trying to do with this boat program here, is actually just to mentor some children and mentor some young guys so that maybe later on they can pay it forward. And after I came up with this idea, then I discovered Joe Yuka's program, the Build to Teach program. He's out of Alexandria, Virginia, where he actually has an excellent program that's put together for, essentially building boats and using that experience to teach math.
Okay.
Which works out really, really good. And unfortunately, he had every once in a while he holds a symposium, and he had one back in October that I hoped to get to, but I wasn't able to with my work schedule and stuff like that. So really what my heart is for this is to, engage youth in learning some hand skills, teach them some math, but actually just be a mentor and show them that there's people out there that really care what kind of people that they turn into and want to help them along the way. And so that was a natural tie-in here with the youth at church. Every church has got kids that need some attention, and so I thought, why don't we combine a boat building program, which is my personal passion at the moment, because I built airplanes for 40 years, and I'm looking for something a little bit more challenging, and combine that with working with these kids. And so we started that, and fortunately, when the church, when we built our new building here, unknowingly, they built me a boat shed out in the back. It's right next to a big cornfield, so there's not a bunch of bit of water any place that were near, but they built a shed out back essentially for storing our garden tools and all that kind of stuff. But it had a nice concrete floor, and it was covered. Wasn't heated, didn't have any power or electricity out there, but at least it was a covered area. And so I approached the leadership here at church about, can I use that to build a boat with the kids? And they were very accepting and said yes. They didn't even think about it twice. And we started that back in 2010 and launched our first boat just this last summer. So
what boat did you select and why for that process, Pete?
Well, I went out on some of the forums when I was first trying to decide what boat, and I picked a boat that was probably a little bit more challenging than some of the ones that are being used. I think Joe's program recommends the Bevan skiff, which is a little bit simpler to put together than what I chose. I ended up, I got pointed towards the website for Bateau Boats, and we picked their 14-foot flat skiff design. And we bought the plans, and I was able to source some Okumi and Marante plywood up in Chicago. So I drove up there. It was about an hour and a half away, and picked up the plywood. And we just did the lofting off of the plans, cut all the parts, and started putting stuff together.
So tell me about that boat. What it's a skiff, so it's a flat bottom boat. Is it all plywood? Does it have chine logs? What kind of construction method?
It's definitely stitch and glue, and it's all plywood with the exception of we've got Brazilian cherry skag, and we made the breast hook and the knees out of Brazilian cherry, and then we've got the inwells and gunnels are out of mahogany. So we kind of dressed it up to make it look a little bit like a stiff on the top end, look like it was actually a full frame boat, but it's not. And we did that out of the mahogany. And I bought the piece of Brazilian cherry at a local lumber yard thinking, oh, this will make a great stem, or not a stem, but a skag because it's so hard. Well, unbeknownst to me, I don't know how many screws I broke in that darn piece of wood, but I wouldn't recommend using it again.
Yeah, that stuff's hard,
It's really hard to machine. It's really hard. It probably would qualify under one of the ironwood definitions or something like that, but I think that skag's going to be there forever.
Yeah.
I don't expect it.
So I'm just curious, about how much you spent total on all the parts and material?
I've got between $1,500 and $1,800 into it right now, I think, with all the material. The plywood for it was about $700, and they advertised that you could use just outdoor grade AC plywood and stuff like that. You build it for about $300, and you probably could, but I wanted it to be around a little bit longer. I wasn't quite sure of the quality of that plywood, so I elected to go with the regular marine plywood and spent about $700 on the plywood, and then the epoxies, $300 or so. So all told, by the time when you got all the paint and stuff like that into it, about $1,500.
Okay.
But, it was a pretty reasonable investment, I think, for the effect that we had on 8 different kids' lives and stuff like that. So
did you, you said you built it over a 3-year period. Did the same group of kids help you work on it that whole time, or?
No, we had kids come in and out, and usually you had about 2 kids working on it at a time. And as kids would graduate or go on to different parts in their lives and things like that, it would have been nice if I had actually been able to be in my first boat. I wasn't quite sure what kind of a schedule, and the fact that we were kind of limited because there was no power in the boat shed and things like that. We're kind of limited to Sunday afternoons to work on it. There was no evening possibilities and stuff like that. So, literally, and here in the wintertime it gets really, really cold, which makes it impossible to use epoxy. You can work on wood, but you can't use epoxy in the wintertime. In the summertime, it might be 95 or 100 degrees out there, which makes it also just as hard to use epoxy. So we literally probably had maybe half of the Sundays in a year. So over a 3-year period, we probably worked on the boat 25 Sundays a year, let's say 75 Sundays at 3 hours a time. So, we actually only have some 220 hours into the construction of the boat. Unfortunately, it just got stretched over a 3-year period of time.
Right.
And, but recently, we're looking at actually adding power to the shed this winter so that we can make this a little bit more of a full-time opportunity and be able to work in the weeknights when kids have got a little bit of time in the evenings so that we can maybe show a little bit faster progress.
Now,
that's definitely one of the things that discourages the kids is not being able to see something happen really fast.
Yeah, but I would think that could be a lesson in itself, that diligence and patience and consistency over a long period of time really can pay off.
Yes. Yeah, it is. And one of the things that the kids certainly do learn is that, you don't swipe a piece of wood with 3 swipes of sandpaper and call it good. They realize that, okay, this is like a 45-minute job, not the 3-second job that I thought it was going to be. And, they've learned to use some tools. A lot of it's been hand tool use. We do have a generator out there, so we've got access to power that way, but we don't have enough to cool it or anything like that. So we've got, a jigsaw out there. We've got some orbital sanders, but basically the rest of it's all hand planes and hand tools and hand saws and things like that we use. So they did get a chance to, learn how to use that, and that's been a lot of fun watching somebody discover what they can do with their hands and not necessarily depend on either buying something off of the shelf or something that's machine or computer made. You can make just as beautiful an item with your two hands in a little bit of time as you can somebody molded out of plastic.
Yeah. So, but it sounds like basically for the most part, the group of kids were the same for the 3-year period?
Yeah. We had about 6 different kids, but they were all in the 12 to, I think the youngest one we had out there was about 8 years old.
Wow.
Out for a weekend. But in general, they were 14 to 16-year-olds that were really interested and would be there and stay steady with it. And we still have 2 kids who come out just about every Sunday that we're able to go out there right now, and they're doing it really well. And they were the ones that really pushed hard with me to get the boat ready to be able to take out to that lake day on at the end of August, where we finally launched the boat. So, it's fun seeing. I mean, they were the ones that were there at the end and could see the end result, but they also appreciated what was done by the other kids before they got there.
Mm-hmm. So tell me some of the things that they learned, Pete, besides some woodworking skills, as far as character skills. Tell me what you saw there with some of these kids.
Well, one of the things that, sorry about that noise. One of these things that I noticed a lot with them was that they would get really disappointed the first time they picked up a tool, and if it didn't turn out exactly right, they were really disappointed with themselves and thought that the problem was them. And where with a little explanation to say that, you weren't born with the skill to use this hand plane or to use a saw, so it takes a little bit of practice, and so that they tell them it's okay to screw up a piece of wood and give them another one and let them start all over again and realize that they can actually learn something. I think some of the things that where they have such access to instant things these days with computers and all that kind of stuff, where the right answer is just a Google away, that when they have to do something themselves and don't get it right the very first time, they actually feel kind of stupid, which is, the first time I saw that, I was really confused by it, but then I saw it more and more often. And so I think, getting access to this kind of stuff and realizing that, no, you're not stupid. It's not a problem with it's not your problem. It's just a problem of practice and muscle memory and things like that. So I think learning patience with themselves is one of the things that they learned a lot. Watching me make a mistake and not get really mad, because I certainly made my fair share of mistakes. And when I would, they would all start laughing and giggling, and they thought it was the greatest thing in the world when they thought we did mistake. So, and I think I provide plenty of that kind of entertainment, because this was my first boat too, so.
Yeah.
There were things that were brand new to me. I mean, in general, I knew how all those operations were going to happen, but until you put a blade or a drill to something, you don't know actually what's going to happen at the end of that. And so it's, they would get great joy when I would make a mistake and things like that. So we kind of instead of like a swear jar or something like that, like you see in some people's houses or around the offices or something like that, we had a stupid jar. And every time anybody called themselves stupid, they had to put $1 in the jar. And that stopped it really, really fast.
I love that idea. That's awesome.
Yeah, and then so that really surprised me, and I'm not sure who is getting more out of this program, me or the kids, to be honest with you, because I'm thoroughly enjoying the time and learning from them. Because my wife and I, we don't have any children, and I'll be quite honest with you, when I first started this, I was scared to death of them because I didn't know exactly how to relate to the teenagers and all that kind of stuff. So I've learned an awful lot too. Yeah.
How about teamwork? How did that go, and did the kids grow in that area, you think?
Yeah, they did, because they ended up, they realized that, you got a big piece of wood and you can't necessarily clamp it in all the right places. So very often you can't just give, okay, you work on this piece, you work on this piece, and we'll see at the end of the day. They have to work together to get something accomplished. They learn the geometry. The cool thing about a boat is that the only straight line occurs when you draw a line on the floor, and then after that, everything's in an angle or a curve. And so, how different joints work together in the relationship of the geometry, and actually how to line that out and determine what that's going to look like before you make the first cut with something, was something that they learned. So they learned to think ahead rather than to jump into things. Or that's what I was trying to teach. I'm not sure if they've actually learned that or not. But, it's one of the things that I was trying to, try to foresee the end product and then work your way back through a couple different steps to figure out what it is that you actually have to get done. And to watch them realize that has been really, really cool. And I've had some kids that are like 14 years old that are just absolutely natural engineers. You just see them. I would do something and they would just sit there and nod your head, and I didn't even have to explain what I was trying to do. They just got it, and so that's been kind of cool to see that. And then there's been some others that aren't naturally inclined that way, but they got this beautiful eye for curves and beauty and all that other kind of stuff. So it's cool because everyone brings a whole different, their own set of gifts and skills to the project, and it's been fun watching them try to meld together, and when one guy doesn't do this job very well, somebody else will take that over for him, and he can go off and do something else he is good at.
So I'm just curious if some of the kids that went through this, if they're going to go build their own boats or maybe consider a career that they would use their hands, more of a vocation than a office job type of thing.
I would hope that would be the case. I'm not sure. I'm really not trying to, build a boat apprenticeship program, but I would hope that somebody would get that out of it, or consider the use of your hands or the trades. To be honest, looking at the way things are going, I think the richest guys in the town are going to be the plumbers and the carpenters pretty soon, because nobody wants to be a plumber or carpenter these days.
Yeah, right.
And I think they're going to be able to charge whatever they want. But
yeah. So, Pete, you guys finished the boat this summer and launched it. So tell me about the launch day and all that.
It was really cool. We, our church, every year at the end of August, we go to the closest body of water that we really have around here is about 18 miles away. It's called Clinton Lake, and it's a dammed-up river that supplies a power plant. And it's a good-sized lake, but every year we go out there at the end of August, and the church, we have a baptism service out there, which is pretty cool. We only do 2 a year, so that's actually one of the largest baptism services that we have. But we also have everybody bring their boats out that day. Well, we've been doing this out there for the entire 10 years the church has been around, and so that was the perfect day that we had to show off the boat that we've been building for so long. And so we actually spent a lot of time in August. I took a couple of weeks of vacation actually to try to help speed up the project to make sure that at least it was seaworthy and watertight when we got out there. We still have to finish putting some color on the boat. We've got all the primer and stuff like that done. But it was completely epoxy coated, 2 coats of epoxy on everything, and we had the interior painted. The seats or the thwarts were all a really nice cedar, which we're leaving in a clear finish, a clear epoxy and varnish finish. That's really pretty against the cream color interior. So we finished all of that, and then we borrowed a flatbed trailer and kind of tied that thing down and took it out there. And people had heard about this mysterious project, but had never wandered out there to the boat shed to see it actually at the church. So they all had a chance to do that. So the last couple of kids, Chris and Luke, who have been working on it with me over that for 2 or 3 weeks, we had the chance to we put it in the water the first time, floated, didn't sink. Everybody got in it, and we went out and we rode it around for a little bit, but we had a little 5-horsepower Tohatsu outboard that was donated, so we had that hung in the back too. And so we spent the whole afternoon doing it, sailing it, and our worship pastor, Aaron, he got a chance to throw all his kids in the boat and take them around the lake. It was a very cool afternoon. It felt really, really good.
Fun. That must have been a blast.
It was. It was.
So did you guys say a prayer as you put her in the water or anything? Or?
Well, I'd been praying all morning before that. So didn't need anything particularly special.
Yeah.
The kids have decided to name the boat Redemption.
Nice.
So we still have to finish that, and so as soon as we get this painted and our church is stepped up, and we're going to put a little bit of power out there so we can get some heat going and work through the winter and the summertime. Maybe a little bit of air conditioning, just so we can control the climate. So we're gonna. Once we finish the paint job on this, and we've got a trailer that was donated to refurbish, and then this project to be done, and we're going to actually give it to our worship pastor because he loves to fish, and he'd never be able to, with 4 kids, he'd never be able to afford to buy a boat. So that was the intention of the project right from the start, was that it would end up being his boat. And then we're going to start with some strip-built canoes next.
Nice.
I've got some other adults that have wanted to come alongside, and we're going to help with that project as we go forward. So it'll be nice to have other teachers to work with, too.
Have you picked a design or a vendor, or know how you're going to do that?
Nothing in particular. I bought a couple of books that are out on the marketplace for strip-built canoes, and I think I have some ideas, but I can't remember off the top of my head what the name of the boat's going to be. But I want it to be like a 17, 18-foot boat so 2 kids can easily get into it, even some of the bigger teenagers, and go out and paddle around by themselves. And I think it'll be really important. That'll teach them some teamwork without turning that thing over.
Maybe you guys can build a whole fleet of canoes, take the whole congregation out next August.
That or kayaks. I'd love to build some kayaks with these kids.
Yeah.
And whether we do it right, from kits or from, just set to drawings and teach them how to loft and cut and throw pieces away that don't fit anymore. Excuse me. So this can go in a lot of different directions. One of the things that I'm trying to work on here in town is I'd like to expand this into like a general woodworking program as well, and maybe move it a little bit. Our church is kind of on the outskirts of town, and I'd like to move this program a little bit closer to the center of town, where we can invite some of the high school kids to come after school and stuff like that, and just have someplace to go and work on wood projects. And, maybe build some simple furniture for some families that can't afford to buy a dining room table and all that kind of stuff.
Sounds like you're going to have to quit your full-time job, Pete, to do all
I'm
this.
hoping to. I got to figure out how to do that.
So, Pete, we're going to wrap it up.
I would really absolutely love to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
I hope my boss doesn't listen to this.
Yeah, really. So, Pete, we're going to wrap it up here.
Okay.
But wanted to ask you one last question here I always say that one last question, and I ask 10 more. But for people listening that are considering doing something like this with at their church or their organization with youth, what would you say to them? What advice would you give them?
Absolutely jump right in. It's been very rewarding on my part from that, and I see growth in the kids that I work with. And the fruits of your labor may not show up until they're 25 or 35 years old, and hopefully those kids would remember what they were exposed to when they were teenagers, and they can turn around and start a similar thing for teenagers when they get a little bit older. That's what I'm trying to do, is just plant some seeds and move it forward. And if you've got the opportunity to even work with one kid at a time, jump on in. You won't regret it. It's a lot of fun. And at the end of the day, you end up with a wooden boat.
Very cool.
How bad is that?
Yeah, really. And Pete, if somebody wants to, I'm going to get some pictures from you to put on my website, but if somebody wants to go online and look at what you did, you say you've got a Facebook page for this, or?
I've got a Facebook group for this, so I'm not sure if everybody can actually find
that's a little bit different.
It a page, but
right.
If you want to, my email address is Pete, P-E-T-E, 17E, at gmail.com. And if you want to send me a quick note there, and I'll get linked up with you on Facebook, and then you can take a look at my group page. And
cool.
I'd be glad to help and correspond to anybody.
Okay, so that's Pete17E at gmail.com.
Yep.
Okay, very good. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this interview over the phone today, Pete, and any parting comments you'd like to make?
just take a look around you, and I'm sure that you're going to find some kids that need some attention, and spend the time with them and invest in the children, because they're the future of our country.
Very cool. Well, thanks a lot, Pete. We'll be talking soon.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, take care. Thanks, Pete, for taking the time to do the interview. That's awesome what you did at your church there. Great character building and team building and mentoring program you got going there. I wish you the best in the future as you actually start over again and do a strip built boat, which really sounds fun. I'm a little jealous because I haven't built a strip built, but maybe there's one in my future. I think there is, actually. If you'd like to connect with me, you can email me, dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. If you're getting in the game or thinking about it, or you've got a wooden boat or you're building or repairing one, send me some pictures. Let me know what you're up to. It'd be fun to hear from you. You can also find me on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and YouTube if you look for Wooden Boat Dan there, those different locations. And on YouTube now, I've got actually, I think, 10 or 12 videos on there, so check that out. If you go to youtube.com/woodenboatdan, that'll take you right to my channel. You can subscribe to it and have some fun with it. So that's it for this week's show, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. Shoot me an email when you get a chance. Have a great week. Keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. Wooden Boat Dan over and out. God bless.